All right, last speaker of the night, Zach Holman.
Jeremy and Rebecca talked about JavaScript. I am not going to talk about JavaScript. I may make fun of it, if that's all right with you guys. I was told to talk about open source, so I'm going to talk vaguely about open source. I entitled this Open Source Misfeasance. I feel like that needs some explanation. Misfeasance, it was going to be malfeasance until I looked it up and it said hostile, aggressive action taken to injure the client's interests. And I was like, that's a little bit more than what I want. So I looked around some more and I was like, oh, misfeasance is, take inappropriate action or give intentionally incorrect advice. Most of my talks are at least incorrect advice. So we're going to go with this one for this one. What I wanted to talk about is I think open source should be a playground. It should be an exploration of different things. And it should be a drunken tequila bender, so to speak. Basically have some fun with it. And I think all too often we get so sucked into, open source is like, enterprise and Oracle and stuff like that. And I think that's horrible. You need to step back and say, hey, like open source is amazing. So if you're a newbie, by the end of this talk, I want you to commit to an open source project. If anybody actually does this, that would just be amazing. It would blow my mind. But if you're a veteran, like a lot of you guys probably are, I just basically want you to kind of rediscover open source and get excited about building again. I know I have a real hard time sort of getting back into open source, getting excited about this stuff, unless I sit down and think, man, I should really contribute and like build some cool stuff. So this is your kick in the pants. I'm Zach Holman on the left, Holman on GitHub, Holman on Twitter. This is my cousin who has no idea what open source is, but I just wanted I'm sick of people putting up photos of themselves giving stern talks and stuff. I'm just hugging my cousin because I love him. And I work at GitHub. You probably know what GitHub is. We do open source stuff sometimes. So I'll talk about a couple different things. First of all, how to fake being an okay programmer. And I mean, I sort of ask myself every single day, I'm a horrible programmer, now what? And I think looking at a lot of your code, I think we can all say this. I don't think anybody has code which is any good. So the question is, how do I fake? How do I fake being a really smart programmer, like all these cool people that I look up to on the open source world? And the reason is, open source is a very scary jump. And if you haven't jumped into open source yet, you may sort of understand that. It's like, man, I kind of want to do this, but it's a little bit scary to have people look at your code when you may not be a great programmer. But like everything else, you don't have to be smart to be successful. This is America. There's tons of examples of people not being the smartest people who are wildly successful or rich or famous or whatever. Open source is like being an adult. It's very magical until you realize nobody knows what the hell they're doing. And I think that's kind of true about a lot of different things. So the question is, how do you fake being smart? How do you fake feeling like you can just push code out there and deal with everyone saying it's horrible? You don't. And I think as soon as you embrace this and you realize that, like, man, everybody's stupid, you can continue on and start building cool stuff. Quick example, about a year ago, I made this project called Spark. It's just bash shell, and it basically did this. Command line interface, and you send it a bunch of data, and it would make very tiny ASCII Spark lines inside of your shell. Very stupid, very kind of fun. The problem is I had no idea what a bash shell is. I sometimes don't even know what that is now. But I wanted to pick a language that I was kind of interested in and learn more about, and I just sort of said, I'm just going to do this, let's see what happens. And then that happened, and I had like 1,600 stars within like 3 or 4 days, which blew my mind because it was probably the worst 30 lines of code I've ever written. The reason I bring this up is that if I look back at this whole experience of building a popular thing that was really horrible, I realized that people are very good at fixing your mistakes. And I had 30-some pull requests within the first few weeks about, you're doing this wrong, how about you do something else instead of doing it the way you're doing it. People also tell you exactly why you're wrong in great detail and possibly call you names, and then they will definitely LOL at your language. If you use bash, they will say, I can do this in one line in Ruby. If you do it in Ruby, they can say, I can do this in, I don't know, I hate Ruby. It really doesn't matter. This is the whole part of open source. Start viewing this as an advantage. This is a really good thing that people are so eager to try and change things, to try and say why you're wrong. It can be kind of ego damaging at times, but only if you don't take that as a point to learn from. And that's really true with everything. You learn it more, you fake it less. I know a little bit more POSIX shell at this point than I did before, and that's great. I'm still very dumb at it, but whatever, I have lots of stars for this project. I also want to talk about kind of the long tail of open source. The big question that a lot of people ask is like, I've never done an open source project before, where do I start? And there's lots of places to start, but I think my favorite place to start is at the long tail of open source. Another example, a couple of years ago I did this project called Fatigue. It imported all my miles that I tracked on Nike Plus, and it converted it to Garmin Connect's crappy service, and none of them had APIs, so this is horrible code, whatever. The problem is outdoor activities frighten nerds, I think, if you want to be stereotypical. So this had like 16 stars, and it still does. But this is one of my favorite projects I've done, because the amount of people in the developer community who have used this is very minimal. But the number of people who have used this in the running community, just for one-off little things, it's been kind of exciting, and it gets me really excited to build projects like this. So exploit your hobbies. This is sort of my suggestion to you. And I'm talking about things like photography, music, if you're into geocaching, or anything like that where you get out of the bounds of programming, forging checks, voter fraud, knitting. Think about like how your hobbies work in the real life and ask yourself, okay, what can I build to help make people's lives easier for this? Because we have a special talent as programmers that we can make things better, we can automate things, and we can do really cool stuff. And the benefit for you for exploiting these sort of hobbies that you really love is that A, it's something that you're really excited in, and B, you don't have to be really good at it to make a really big impact. Also hint, your hobbies do not include another testing framework for Node.js. We don't need more. I'm trying to get outside of the box, not more. Okay. What I'm trying to say is this is the highest impact to effort. You can, for a little bit of effort, you can make a really big impact on communities that aren't necessarily Node.js testing gurus or something like that. Start looking at other areas and seeing how you can make a benefit there. I also want to talk about exploiting open source for pleasure, for your own personal gain, fun stuff like that. Step one is to step one is to avoid burnout. Yeah, avoid burnout. I say this a lot. I think code is a hugely creative endeavor. We like to think that code is like very logical and you're telling your computer to do step 1, 2, 3, 4. But really it's problem solving, and you have to be very creative to come up with the best way to do these sorts of things. And man, if you're not in the right mood to do this, your brain is just somewhere else, you can't problem solve like you should be able to do normally. I view open source as the perfect breather. If you're really stuck up in some hard problem at work or some other project you're working on and you just can't get further, open source is good. Like, exploit it as that. Like, start doing really fun things on the side. Alongside that, learning. This is sort of the reason why I think a lot of people use open source, because it's just great. You can force yourself to try new techniques that you wouldn't otherwise just throw on production for good reason. You can force yourself to try new languages. I use this a lot for something I want to try out, and it's kind of nice to say, like, okay, I could do this in 20 minutes in Ruby. Can I pick a different language that I don't really know and do it a lot better? Setting yourself those sort of arbitrary guidelines to getting stuff done can be really productive for you. And just remember, you're not getting paid, so you can't get fired. No one's ever gotten, well, that's probably not true. Somebody's probably gotten fired for pushing horrible open source, but it's really hard to do. So kind of take advantage of that and just like start pushing really weird stuff because it's interesting to you. Another aspect of this is increasing your fame and glory. This makes people uncomfortable. I understand. If you want to go very stereotypical, nerds are very introverted and nice and awesome, and that's totally great qualities to have. But there's still a lot of people that are like, I'm not sure I want to be in the limelight necessarily. The reality is your clout score really matters. Totally just kidding. The reality is there anybody from Clout here? God, I just realized that. The reality is that publicity helps, and I think that it is naive to think otherwise. The reason why I say this is that you don't know what you'll launch tomorrow. Typically what you'll see happen is someone will say, okay, I've been working on this the last 4 months, this is a project, this is a new startup I'm making or a new feature I'm launching, and I really want people to talk about this. But by the time you get to that point, it's kind of too late. You can't really force social media to happen easily. A much better approach is to spend lots of years blogging, tweeting, releasing good open source for no other reason because you really like to do it. And if you can start gaining sort of a personal following, people will be more happy to share stuff because they really dig your perspective on things. So start thinking about how can you sort of start building this sort of foundation, not because you need something today and you want every project you do to be insane, but because you want every project to be fun and interest people and make people happy. And then maybe down the line, when you're actually launching a new startup 3 years from now, you can have a solid base that you wouldn't have otherwise. So that's the personal side of things. I also want to talk about business because that's probably why y'all are here. You told your companies I'm going to the Times to learn lots of business impulse points or something. So I'm going to talk about the Fortune 100. No, I'm not. Fortune 100 is very boring to me, Oracle and all that stuff. I want to know about how do real businesses use open source? How can you as your business kind of do some more interesting things that is not involving kernel drivers or something? One thing I really dig that I've been looking into is 37 Signals puts their entire API of all their products on GitHub itself. They don't have a separate developer website or anything like that. They just put it on different repos. So they can have example code, you get your nice syntax highlighting. It's all versioned so you can see specifically how the API has changed and just browse like you would a normal GitHub repo. And then it's all diffable, so you can see, okay, we're now supporting 3 different response types here, and I can very easily see this is the change that happened. This is really cool. This is so crazy that GitHub isn't even doing this for our own stuff yet. So I think that's kind of fascinating. Like, what can you do on your own side of things to open source stuff and get people more engaged? In terms of GitHub, one kind of project we like to do a lot, or talk about a lot, is the GitHub Services one. This is the one that handles all of the hooks and the service hooks that happen when you push code to your server. So think about all the alerts in Campfire or email or build servers, all of that stuff. This all happens in this repo. And it supports 110 plus services at this point, which is insane. Because I'll give you a hint, there's no way we could do this ourselves. We'd have to have like 6 employees working this all the time, and we'd have to set up 110 services, which is insane. So for us, this is really good in that we can get a much better product by just sort of crowdsourcing it. And start thinking about ways you can sort of set your company up to leverage this stuff better than you could do, even if you hired your own employees to do this nonstop. Finally, let's just talk about doing open source real good. I don't even know what that means. This is kind of a filler slide. This is Brazil. I just want to point that out. Freaking beaches are awesome. Last week or something like this, I merged a pull request to one of my projects. It's just fixed typo. Is literally one change that there was like an extra letter or something like that. From my perspective, I've done this a lot. I've merged people's pull requests. It's not that big of a deal. I see this on my news feed. I'm like, yeah, that happened. Imagine that this is like your first pull request, and you sent this to a project you use or you admire or something like that. They don't view this as that. They view it something like that. And this is like a cause for celebration. Be really excited about that. I really think that your first pull request is really sacred, and be cognizant of that for other people. Don't ruin someone's first time. I mean, if you think back to the first time maybe your pull request was accepted, if you can't remember that, I mean, maybe that was a crazy night or something. Side story, my first pull request was I sent it upstream to RESTful authentication to who would be my future coworker, Rick Olson, at GitHub. And he said, no, that's too complicated or something. And I kind of went, oh, and then I stopped with open source for like 6 months. And then I gave him shit for that for the next 3 years. When I knew him in person. So anyway, don't ruin someone's first time. Be cognizant that this is a really big deal. Open source is scary. Even though this is just one commit with one addition, the fact that this person, I don't even know if this is a new person in open source, but if it is somebody new to open source, to get to this point you have to clone down a repository, you have to know enough about Git, you have to figure out, okay, is this a change that makes sense, and then send it back upstream and still go through the whole, I could just call him a jerk and it would be really awkward. Recognize that open source is scary. This stuff is really frightening for some people who are first timers at this stuff. And being helpful leads to more contributions. If I very nicely say, okay, this is just a typo change, but thank you very much, this is really awesome, I guarantee you he's going to be much more interested in contributing meaningful patches to your project in the future. Quiz. Do you know what the best GitHub event is? And I'm talking about stuff on the newsfeed. I'm just going to tell you. It's this. So-and-so open sourced a specific project. I love this so much, and it's not given enough acclaim, and I want to acclaim this right now. This is basically an indication of moving a private repository to a public repository. And then we display, they open source this on the news feeds. Put it another way, this means you're going from a finished product, more or less, to a publicized product. Every now and then someone links me, or I stumble on a repository and it just has a README, or it has a really great description, like, this will, fix Ruby forever. And I'm like, I want to know about that. And then it's like, there's no code here yet. I'm like, crap. There's nothing worse than that. And I love this sort of reveal where someone's like, I've been working on this in private for a week or a month or a year or something, and now it's open source, and now I reveal it to everybody else, and it's kind of a fun little a way to get people more excited about this stuff. Doing something like this encourages sharing, rather than just going open source for 6 months and stumbling along. If you just flip the switch, people are excited about it, they get them tweeting about it, they get them Facebook +1 G-chair, I don't even know what I wrote there, except emoji invite only status is really great. But think about doing stuff like this. There's no reason why your stupid little open source project can't be a really awesome product that you're releasing like a feature. And I think that it's more fun to do stuff like that. I also want to talk briefly about docs first development, because I think it really increases your code quality to write documentation first. I don't care about code quality. That's not the point here. The point is, if you write documentation first, and I include READMEs, bootstrap scripts, issues, anything surrounding that, it means less work for you. I've had this happen for a few times on some longer running projects where I'd be on a branch and I'd be in a public repository building something for like 3 or 4 months. And unless typically I'll write the README last, or I'll write the script that installs all the dependencies last, because I don't want to deal with that right away. But by doing that, you're basically saying, I don't want any help on this until some weird point in the future, and at that point they've just tuned off and they're like, I don't care anymore. So think about, even starting before you're getting on the feature itself, can you write something to help newbies get going on your project faster? Can you open issues to yourself and then let them fix it for you as you go? Basically help people help you. Because you want to get more people active in your project, but also because we're all lazy, and that's just a lot cooler way to do it. Finally, I just love pointless code. This is an art that I think people also forget. Why Lucky Stiff was really good on this, because he had a really awesome code that was amazing, but also he had some code where I feel like he did this just for the heck of it. And I think that sort of playfulness is awesome and kind of lacking in our boring world nowadays. At some point, I swear I will push code like this. It'll be a method definition, I'll pass in a string, and then I'll do ridiculous string mutation code to this password I'm passing in. And then just return the original plain text password. One, because security people would just die at this, and trolling security people is the funniest thing ever. But I don't know, it's just like, would this have an impact on my actual code? Probably not, unless it's like really slow or something. But it could be kind of fun for somebody who's actually digging into my project to see something like this. It's just important to play. And I think open source is a really good atmosphere to let people play around with your own code, to make people really happy, get people excited about building stuff. One of my favorite examples of this recently is a project called GIF Sockets. GIF Sockets, sorry. The proper pronunciation is GIF, not GIF. It's stupid. But basically this is real-time communication using GIFs, which is the funniest thing ever. What you do is on the server side, it turns out browsers will keep rendering a GIF until they get all the frames back from the server. So what this guy or gal did was basically would push text, render it in an image, and then push that frame to the client frame by frame. So you could do real-time communication via GIFs. This is a solution in search of a problem, and it is probably the coolest thing of all time. Definitely, if you start out with like, wouldn't it be cool if I could communicate using GIFs? I guarantee you're going to learn some really cool stuff on the way to that weird endpoint. Stretch your mind. I think that really makes you a better coder, makes you a better person in our industry. Also, the shit's just funny, and I love funny stuff. So overall, just build fun, build silly, and then just build things. I want you to get really excited about like the opportunity we have. I completely mean it when I say I think we are in the best industry on the planet. We can just build things at the drop of a hat and do really fun things, and it doesn't always have to be, Fortune 100, boring whatevers. Open source is awesome. Thank you.